Good afternoon. I just wanted to do a quick audio check, make sure everything's okay.
I can hear you on my end, so
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
of course.
And also, Commissioner Loachman, I think you can share your screen. We allow that. But
Okay.
do you know where the green button is down there? Good. Okay, great.
Yeah, I'll close out everything else I'm doing so I don't want to shut the screen. Thank you.
You bet.
We'll follow your lead. Steve Dundorf's here with me, so just let us know on the time, etc. And we do have another meeting at 6 that we'll have to jump to.
Sure.
Thank you.
Looks like
Can you hear us from the boardroom?
We can hear you, but can't see you.
Okay, I think we're almost there. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you.
Just checking on those in the boardroom. Will you be able to see the presentation if we share it, or does that not make sense?
Yeah, we've got the big fancy screen here. So
Okay, thanks.
thank you, ARPA money.
Sorry.
There we go.
Okay,
All right,
Okay,
Dolores, we can see you guys now,
great.
Oh, good.
Great.
You can hear us?
and we can hear you just fine. Yep.
Terrific. So, Commissioner, whenever you're ready, thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you. And I may just ask real quick if folks can just do a quick introduction, just because we can't see who's in the room with you, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Dolores, do you want to start?
Absolutely. I'm Dolores Vasquez, the town clerk.
And then we'll
Victoria Simonson, the town administrator.
Thank you, Commissioner Loachman. It is only the Board of Trustees and then the town clerk and myself.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'll invite, my name is Martha Loachman, and I am Boulder County Commissioner, District 2, and also supporting the campaign committee for ballot measure 1B. And Steve Dunford's here with me as well. And so I'll invite Steve to jump on the screen and also in the presentation as well. So we have another meeting that we're presenting at 6 o'clock, so we won't have, we'll do a quick version of the presentation, because more importantly, we want to make sure that we get to some of your questions. So I'll just jump right in here on the presentation. And I know we sent over a one-pager that was just the, a real modified version of the information on this ballot measure, as well as the ballot resolution language. But if folks don't have that, just let me know and we can resend that even with the presentation if that's helpful. So we're here to ask for a resolution of support or an endorsement from Town of Lyons, from the trustees and mayor. So we appreciate you taking some time in your workshop before your meeting this evening to just learn more about this particular measure. And so the measure and the information can be found online at emergencyservicesboco.org. And what this measure is focusing on really is the 10+ million visits to open space per year. The amount of open space, this land that folks are on, and search and rescue operations is really what this ballot measure is focusing on. And there's a couple of visuals here for you just to see. I think it's very helpful to understand the breadth of the work that is done. And so I always, if we were there in the room, I'd have you raise your hands, and just with the question of who's participating this evening, whether you're virtual or you're in the room, has ever gone out on a bike, hiking, climbing, skiing, other outdoor activities on the 100,000+ acres of open space that we have throughout Boulder County, or has ever had anybody come and visit you, maybe come back from college to come see Colorado or the area, or friends or neighbors, folks who've heard about Colorado and Boulder County, who've ever been out at any of those spaces. And I would guess that probably everybody's hand is raised. And this search and rescue function is ran by volunteers. And that's the key to this particular measure. So we've got folks out doing over 200 search and rescues every year, increasing. So here's the nuts and bolts of the tax. It is a new sales and use tax. It's a 0.1%. for the first 5 years. And so after 2027, it automatically will be reduced to 0.05%. And what that means is that we will then, it'll continue on, and it's focusing on these items that are on the right on the screen. So it's search and rescue organizations, fire agencies, ambulance services, and trailhead safety services. So that's what the funding from 1B will be focusing on. So the primary search and rescue organization in Boulder County is Rocky Mountain Rescue Group. So we are funding initially capital expenses to build a new headquarters on a lot that already exists here in Boulder County, in a facility that already exists but needs some significant refurbishing and reconstruction. The other partners that are on here are listed in the ballot resolution language, and those are the other search and rescue organizations that will also receive operational funding from this particular ballot measure. And you can see from the left to the right, in just a couple quick photos, the work that has continued to do and how that has evolved. There's technical search and rescue, some of these really very specific work that the volunteers do. I'm not going to read every line in these slides to you, but I think, again, that piece of understanding that the search and rescue operations that happen will continue to be volunteer work. And this is a piece I like to share with folks, because until I met Steve and really did some conversation with search and rescue folks, did I understand, I heard the questions of like, well, why don't you just charge and that's how you'll get your money? But talking to search and rescue professionals who are highly trained, understand, and they shared that we can't put people at risk. And if you think about it for a minute, if you were out hiking or climbing or biking and got hurt, I personally would probably give it a second thought before I called for an ambulance or for medical help, with that question of how much is it going to cost me? The fear of what is that going to mean when I actually get someone to help me? And it puts the person who's been hurt at risk if we do that, and it also puts the volunteers at risk, because the longer somebody waits, the night gets darker, it gets colder, the elements change, etc. And so that to me was very helpful to understand the reason why this is so critical for the folks that do get rescues. Here's a couple just understandings around the headquarter building, because again, this is the first priority in capital expenses. There is a building, it's 60 years old, it is not meeting the capacity. And the other one that to me is really critical when we talk about search and first responders is if it's in the winter, all the equipment right now is being stored outside. And so if you have to wait for somebody to be able to de-ice the truck that's going to go get you, that also puts folks at risk. So how do we prepare for a better response? And these are a couple of the pieces. The training, the building will allow for more training. It will allow for items to be stored inside. This gives you a schematic, that white building kind of in the center there, of what the planned headquarters will be. And it's important to understand that the history of that building doesn't allow that building to be used for anything else but search and rescue organizations. Here's some of the just capital needs that would be met with this measure. What else? And we don't think about all these different pieces. Just it goes everywhere from a really expensive truck that can take care of all those needs to the day-to-day items that have to be ready to go. And I think this is a really good example that Steve shared with us, is the radio. And I know in the mountain communities, radios are needed for a whole lot of different reasons, and search and rescue is one of them. I bet most of us have replaced our cell phones more often than the need for these radios. And so it just gives us a good idea of what we talk about when we talk about ongoing capital needs and operational expenses. The other item that's included in this ballot measure is funding for mountain and rural fire districts. The supplemental funding will be looked at. Right now, what we're talking about is doing a community type of advisory board. We won't be able to put staff to work to get that together until after this ballot measure passes. But that's our plan right now, is to create an advisory board with experts who are part of mountain and rural fire districts and community organizations who understand what search and rescue really is as well. So those are some of the items that will be included in that supplemental funding. The other one that folks don't necessarily realize is that on Boulder County staff, we have wildland firefighters. But the problem is that they're part-time folks. And we are now understanding more and more that there isn't a wildfire season anymore in Colorado. It's an ongoing year-round need. And so this money will also help support that firefighting staffing at the county. The other piece that's included in the regulatory language is the ambulance services. And so this is just a good reminder for folks who might be watching as well, that there are areas in Boulder County that receive funding from their town or municipality, and there are others that don't have that funding source and still need ambulance services. What I try and help people understand is that the cost in ambulance is really similar to the medical costs that we're seeing everywhere. And you can see in the numbers there that RMR, Rocky Mountain Rescue Group, provided. The cost of ambulance services continues to go up. And so this will be one of the funding sources to help our mountain and rural Boulder County districts and areas. The other one is trail and trailhead safety services. One of the pieces that we've seen since COVID started and everywhere, and I know Lions as well, the amount of folks who have increased their outdoor activities. And there's two pieces. One is the trails themselves, and then the trailhead safety. And what we've realized is that we have had to increase our staffing over the last several years to be able to manage that. And the top picture up on the right just gives you one quick example, one little portion of Boulder County where cars are just parked anywhere and everywhere. But the problem right there is if an emergency vehicle needs to get through there, we're in a crisis situation. And so that's what the staffing is for. So that's the quick version of 1B and the emergency services. And I would like to invite Steve if you're available to ask any question or respond to any questions that folks have as well. So we'll open it up for questions.
Great, thank you so much. And thank you again for being here.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how well my microphone is working.
I can hear you.
Yeah, sounds great.
Questions for Commissioner Loachman and for Steve?
Sure, I have a question. When we purchase hunting and safety, or I mean, hunting and fishing licenses, I know we pay a search and rescue surcharge on that.
Mhm.
Is that all going to the state level? Does any of that get captured here at our county level? Do you know?
Yeah, good question. And we get this often. So sure, that goes into a fund that the sheriff's offices can request funding from. And if someone has a card or a license, they can request that funding immediately if they incur immediate expenses. If they don't have the card or they don't have any immediate expenses, it goes into a pot of money that is available at the end of the year that sheriff's offices can apply for. And I'll just give you an example from our Rocky Mountain Rescue standpoint. We get about $10,000 to $15,000 a year from that fund of leftover money that hasn't been requested during the year. So that's kind of one of our all of the above on funding. It's something we have to apply for, and so it's typically helped us, with our capital expenses.
Yeah, so 10 to 15 is not that much. That's like a small percentage of your budget, I assume.
Yeah, our budget, and we're just one organization, but our budget is about $150,000 operating budget and $100,000 of capital budget per year.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Trustee Dawson.
Hi. Yeah, I was wondering where the $250,000 comes from right now.
Oh, sure. Yeah, it's a whole. It's truly an all of the above. So we get about $100,000 from the county, which is just county general budget through the sheriff's office. So that's a decent chunk. We get quite a bit from donations. We also, we mentioned DOLA, that's that funding from hunting fishing licenses. We apply for grants as well, and that generally makes that work out. Now, we certainly have funding needs that go beyond what we have coming in, but we're doing decent with the all of the above approach. but it still, it still requires, a good amount of time for our team, not only to do search and rescues, but also to spend time fundraising as well.
Sure. Oh,
Yeah.
and I had no idea. It's funny, I've been receiving these alerts from Boulder County every time there's a search and rescue operation, and I had no idea those were volunteer efforts. So I commend you for managing all of that with volunteers on top. So another question, just a curious question here in case I get questions. Where is this planned headquarters going to be? Or where is the actual one now?
Yeah, sure. It's the planned one is where our current one is. That's at 3720 Walnut, which is just west of Foothills on Walnut, or Walnut goes under Foothills.
So it
there's
wouldn't take you very long to get to any of the trails in the foothills then?
Yeah, it's fairly centrally located for, Southern County, Northern County, access to the canyons. Yep.
What
Yeah,
would you say is your average response time?
Well, most of our calls are probably between, most of our calls are Eldorado Canyon, Flatirons, up to Lions, and then up the canyon. So I'd say our typical response time is maybe, well, it depends on traffic. We're going emergent, it's probably 10 minutes, 15 minutes. A little more to get up to Lions, but 20 minutes.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, the site itself has, there's a lot of work that has to get done on the site to bring it up to where we need, but it should present a pretty good cost savings reusing the land. And that land, right, it can only be, I think, Marta, I think you mentioned that it can only be used for search and rescue. It was originally a donation from the federal government, but it's under a restricted deed. So this is, it's really making the land use for what it's intended, and to save the county some funding.
Well, I have a couple of questions. Trustee Dachi asked my first one, which is where is this located? So besides Rocky Mountain Rescue, there are 3 other organizations that this would fund. Is that right?
3 other search and rescue organizations, correct? Yeah, we're the Mountain Search and Rescue, and then Front Range Rescue Dogs, Boulder Emergency Squad, and Boulder County Mounted Search and Rescue.
Okay, and so the search and rescue services would cover all of Boulder County?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, everyone serves all of Boulder County.
Okay, so who's going to have oversight to make sure that, for lack of a better phrasing, that all the money is being spent well? Is there county oversight? Is there a general nonprofit oversight over the 4 different organizations, or how would that work?
Yep, that's a great question. So that was a little bit of what I was alluding to, just in regards to the advisory group that'll be put together, because it's going to be ongoing funding. So that will be in partnership with the Sheriff's Office, with those 4 organizations, and then the Mountain and Rural Fire District folks is what we're talking about right now. And I want to just caveat that again, because it's a campaign issue right now, we can't have staff working on that. So as soon as the November ballot passes, then we'll put that into place.
Okay, so the notion is that there would be this advisory board from a number of different organizations that would have oversight.
And give recommendations to the board on the distribution of that supplemental funding for fire and rural districts, as well as the operational expenses for the search and rescue organizations.
Okay.
Because after the major capital of the building of the facility is done, then that funding will still continue to be able to serve those other needs.
Okay. And what's the expected timeline for the capital projects if this passes?
Of the building?
Mm-hmm.
Steve,
Sure, I can answer that. It's about 2 years of design and contracting, and 2 years of construction.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it's still a ways out. We have needs now, but obviously, if we don't get going now, it's even longer out. So.
And would this, if this passes, would it start funding your immediate needs as soon as the money is collected, or is there kind of a wait time to get the funding?
Well, I think, the majority is going to the capital project, and, it'll take time to collect that, but I think the timing works out about right with construction. Operational needs, I think, that's gonna get pushed off for a bit.
Okay.
Until we get the capital costs funded.
And this does not have a sunset, correct?
Correct. We feel pretty confident that search and rescue is going to continue the need. And like I said, the volunteers are adamant about staying volunteer, which I think is amazing.
It is amazing, and we're so fortunate in this county to have that resource. So very fortunate. I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Well, it looks like you get a couple minutes before your next call.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. I was just at the Spoke on Kaufman at the grand opening of that. Speaking of partnerships, speaking of resources and work that's being done around Boulder County is super exciting. And so now to be able to partner with Rocky Mountain Rescue Group and Steve and these folks to support these efforts, it's a great reminder of why we're in public service to mayor and to the trustees too. So we appreciate your time and look forward to hearing what you all decide in regards to resolution of support or endorsement, or if any of you individually want to get involved. I know Steve would welcome that support as well.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you
much.
all. Have a great
good
evening.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. The next half of our workshop is an introduction to some of the budget discussions that we will be having over the coming months. And Director Iceland's here. She's going to give an overview of the surveys you all took and kind of give you the results of that, as well as talk about our capital improvement planning a bit in conjunction with your budget priority discussion later tonight. So,
Just so you know, my button to turn you green is not operational.
okay. I think
I'm not
it's-
ignoring it, so I just didn't want you to think.
Patsy, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you all for taking the time to fill out that form. Again, it was not to get concrete direction that we were necessarily building in, but really to just generate and kind of compare some overall themes from all of you and kind of be proactive as we build the budget instead of reactive and us bringing a draft budget to you all for consideration and approval, and then finding out that we completely missed the mark and we didn't include any of your priorities and goals. So like Victoria said, this presentation does really tie well. I feel like the capital piece really ties well into the conversations that she's going to have with you later on your priorities and your goals. So I'll go ahead and share my screen with you all. And I just have a brief presentation. Just bear with me here. Again, so this is really just an ongoing series of education and discussions to kind of outline where we want to be in 2023 and what we're going to prioritize. So we'll just kind of briefly go over what the survey discussed and kind of go from there. As a reminder, 2023 outlook here, Colorado inflation estimates for 2022 right now are about 8.2%. So they have definitely increased, as well as 2023 has increased as up to 4.4%. So, what does this mean for us? What does it mean for the town? It means that we're going to just need to be really careful. We're going to have conservative projections for 2023. You don't want to get too ahead of yourself with your revenue projections, as well as be too shy with your expense projections, so that we can kind of keep in line with where we want our service levels to be and where we want our priorities to be. So I will tell you that prioritization is going to be really key for us, as it is always during budget time, but just preliminary numbers that I'm putting together. We're not going to have a lot of wiggle room for capital. And if we want to have some wiggle room for capital, we're going to definitely consider granting sources, as we always do. but we're going to have to just be careful with our priorities. So these were just your all responses to the first question that was on that form regarding inflationary adjustments. The intent for that question wasn't to say, you know, should we increase our expenses by 5%? Should we increase them by 6% across the board? It was just kind of to get a feel for your reaction to, you know, inflation. And, you know, some people have a, you know, reaction where they're saying, well, if it's, you know, inflation is going to be really high, we need to just ratchet down our expenses, or we need to adjust for the inflation. So this chart just shows that 3% of you were in the range of 5%, and 2 of you were 6%, and then one additional wanted historical data. And we're definitely going to get that historical data to see where, you know, the last 5 years of inflationary adjustments were and what have our expenses increased over the last 5 years. And that's the kind of stuff that I will be able to present in the all-day workshop in October. The next slide was the board's response to salary adjustments. You can see right in the range of 4 to 6% was the comfort level there. And then again, you know, some historical data that was requested, which will be provided at a later date. I will say that while 2022 is an 8.2% inflationary inflation, and 23 is estimated 4.4. It's going to be tricky from a fiduciary standpoint to be up that high, definitely. So we're going to just need to be careful. And, you know, Victoria and I are having discussions on COLA, which is, you know, your cost of living adjustments versus merit, and how we incorporate those in to the budget, and what kind of mix or non-mix are we doing. And we're also working on, every year we usually get that data from our comparable municipalities. So while we might not, you know, we might want to look at some municipalities that are smaller and the same size as us, really when it comes time to recruitment and retaining employees, you know, we're really looking, unfortunately, at, you know, comparing to Boulder and Longmont and, you know, some of those other communities, you know, that have additional abilities to offer those higher adjustments. So while this wasn't this is what we're going to put in the budget, it kind of is just gauged our, you know, feel for the board's comfort for those kinds of salary adjustments. And we'll see what we can work in for the budget. So response to fee schedules, the common themes here, I will say that it was very nice for us to see with a lot of these questions that we got a few of those responses of, we trust staff. We trust staff to look into these. We trust staff's recommendations. And, you know, that was a common theme amongst a lot of these questions, and including the fee schedule, which staff will definitely be looking into. But a couple of the items that stuck out were camping fees, which was brought up by multiple board of trustees, utility rates, and then parking fees. I think parking fees is definitely a good one as we continue to add additional kiosks across the town. You know, we've talked about implementing different fee structures for different areas. So that's definitely one place that we'll look at. Again, we don't plan on adopting the new fee schedule till December. So we definitely still have some time to take a look at all of these and get some comparables and of course get some you know, ideas of what our current costs are to provide some of these services. But these are definitely areas where we had common themes. This slide was the other priorities question. So I tried to kind of tie it into some of your current goals and objectives for your all's term that Victoria is going to be looking at. And so I tried to fit everybody's requests on there or ideas on there. I did run short of some of them, but the ones with asterisks here, are ones that were submitted by multiple trustees. So wildfire mitigation was submitted by multiple. A couple times I saw the 24 hours in police coverage, which I know we kind of have brought up with Sergeant Christ, and that's definitely something that was on their radar, and but it didn't really sound like they would, even if we had all the money in the world, they just don't have the bodies right now. But I think that was definitely a common theme. Sidewalks and street crossings for walkability, that was maybe 3 or 4 trustees brought that up, in addition to street improvements, which was brought up maybe by 1 or 2. A couple of trails were brought up, and then wayfinding signs were brought up by a couple, and then some multimodal enhancements in Old Town. And I will say that some of these are already being addressed in the budget, which is nice, so that we can, we're definitely aligned there. But some of the other categories were the Second Avenue stormwater, a shuttle from Second Avenue to Main, some additional landscaping, the Triangle, Main Street, and some neighborhood roads. That was brought up by 1. Affordable housing in a housing authority. And then the Parks Public Works Maintenance Building was also another one. So those are, again, some of the ones that we saw, and then the ones with asterisks are the ones where we had common themes that were submitted by multiple trustees. Capital projects. So I did include, and I'll bring that up here on the screen, I did include a list of capital projects that were, staff has a long range capital plan. So we try to identify projects within, the next 4, 5, 6 years, and try to figure out where we're going to plan for those, kind of a wish list and, future needs. So what I did was took the unbudgeted 2023 projects and any additions to the 2022, if there is funding that allows for that. And staff identified higher priority projects, maintenance projects, things that they felt were, needed to get done sooner rather than later for, whether it be grants funding or other reasons. So we did identify those with an asterisk on there. And then I highlighted anything that I thought aligned with the Board of Trustees priorities and their priority projects. So I'll bring this up. This is what the unbudgeted projects looks like. So you can see, and it's divided by funds. Anything that's highlighted and also has an asterisk is something that is identified by staff as a high priority, and also may, in one form or another, meet one of the Board of Trustee goals. I will tell you, we have more projects on this list than we can afford to fund. So we will be needing to prioritize and narrow those down. So really the intent tonight was to give you an idea of what we're looking at, and discuss, see if you had any, higher priority projects where you felt strongly about. Again, we don't, we're just looking for discussion points and, common themes so that we can put what we feel is necessary in the budget, and then see where we shake out at the end and where we might need to adjust. So you can take a look at some of these projects that are on here. Some of them do have grant funding associated with them, specifically down here in the parks side, the trail extension. Now I know Tracy is going to be discussing this in the next board workshop, because this is a pretty large difference from what we saw before related to some options that we have. So this is on the town's contribution on the high end, but there's potential that could be brought down to 200,000 if we chose one item versus another. So I think that's going to be something that's discussed at the next board meeting workshop, as well as some other potential project shortfalls. So take a look at this list. You can kind of see where some items where staff thought were high priorities, and then some of these could meet one of the goals and objectives of the current board now. So So our next steps are to identify the highest priorities for the town. And then we'll continue these discussions at the October 3rd workshop. Staff will incorporate as many priorities as we can into the draft budget as funding allows. As I mentioned before, we're definitely without outside funding sources. We won't be able to fund that entire list by a decent amount. We used quite a bit of available fund balance at the beginning of the year that was trickled over from 2021 to fund some project shortfalls, other, US 36 Broadway and the GoCo project, Safe Routes to Schools. So we don't have a lot of extra right now. There is a really good possibility that we will come in a good amount under budget in our expense side for 2022. But unless we're willing to actually cut those budgets in order to, free up that money for 2023, we can't necessarily rely on those right now to fund 2023 projects. Staff will present the 2023 draft budget to you all on Saturday, October 22nd. Mark your calendars, that is an all-day workshop. We don't usually go the full time. So that's kind of nice, but you'll get the budget to take a look at by October 13th. And then at that point, after, we present to you what we've included in the budget, if we need to make revisions based on feedback from you all and discussions, then we'll definitely do that in between that time and the budget adoption. That's all I have. I was kind of hoping, to go over any questions that you might have. And then if there's still time that allows, maybe we can take a look at some of those capital lists or, get a better feel for which ones you all are really hoping and thinking we need to make room for.
Jocelyn, so you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I was curious, going back to the chart, why are 2 items in red under?
Great question. Very great question. I should have noted that. These are additional 2022 identified priorities. So what if it was allowed that we would have additional funding left? So for example, we've identified areas where we're not going to spend 2022 dollars, that we might seek board approval to move forward with those earlier than 2023. So for example, Parks and Public Works dry storage, I believe that's for salt, if ice slicer, if I'm not mistaken. And then we do have some improvements needed for town hall. We think we have identified funding for those. Operationally, we did include some town hall maintenance dollars in 2022 that we could utilize for those, but we are getting some water damage, as you may all be aware, in town hall, and we need to make some improvements before we run into some big troubles with this old building we've got. So those are the ones highlighted in red. I think that is all that those are the only 2, but that's a great question.
I was just going to ask, what did you have in mind for the security improvements for town hall? Just wondering.
Do you want me to take that?
Yes, please.
Okay. There was an inquiry by the mayor of some options to potentially increase security in this building due to what's happening all over the country. And so we have gotten a couple of quotes from people to do some fire resistant window here, replacing some of our residential doors in town hall with commercial grade steel doors. And then it's like any home improvement project. They come in and they say, well, you don't want to just do this window, because if the bad guys here. He's just gonna go to the next window or shoot the lock on the door. So we've been getting just some quotes on and some ideas, and we will have that ready for you to present to you guys if you want to do anything. Because the other thing is, how much do we invest in this building?
Yeah.
Knowing that it is not, ADA accessible or has appropriate HVAC. And we've had several floods recently. This room, we have actually had black and a white mold for days in here. The records room flooded recently. It's just, it's not really appropriate, especially for ADA. The bathrooms aren't accessible to the public really in the front, some of those things. So we have gotten a list of potential projects, and you guys, when we meet, can decide on whether or not it's worth investing in those or not for this building. But some basic security that would maybe deter someone for a little bit.
Tana, did you ever?
Yeah, I have a couple questions around the big ticket items like the wastewater treatment plant and Parks and Rec maintenance storage facility. I'm just wondering, is that entirely town funded, or is there grant money included in that?
Great question. Do you want to take the wastewater? Yeah, you can probably take both of them, Victoria, if you'd like.
Aaron's here too now, Cassie, you can't see him.
Oh, okay.
The wastewater treatment plant, if you recall, we applied for congressionally directed spending for that entire amount, and it did make it through the first wave. And so they have said it could take up until through October to get here back on that. So if we get that funding, that's what we would pay for those improvements with. If we do not get it, Aaron,
looking at, so we've submitted, we have our re-rating project that we've talked about a little bit, which has made some changes, improvements to the wastewater plant for Eastern Corridor build out that's still been sitting there. Oh, you can.
it's okay.
I can hear you though.
It's still
Sorry
working.
about that.
So that was up 250,000 a couple of years ago. Again, with the number of changes, changed where the outfall was. We went through some of the permitting I've talked about a couple of times, changes. We haven't done that project yet because we've been waiting to see where we stand with our permits on what we need to do. And then there's been the Honeywell negotiation. So there's been no great rush to do it because we're always still waiting. Well, if Honeywell gets to its final stages, okay, we have a lot more money and we want to do a much bigger project. And then it was even just before the congressional funding, or maybe it was the last round of congressional funding, we had to submit something of what we thought we needed to do. So taking a scale back from Honeywell, which includes damages, compensation, other things, we put out what was it that we thought really needed to be done to get the wastewater treatment plant that we should have had. And that would be at the $3 million level. So we're really looking at that if we can get the congressional funding.
And when is that? When are they supposed to decide on that?
No later than the end of October.
Okay.
And the specific 3 million here does not relate to Honeywell.
No. This is the amount of proposed or projected funds to do everything correctly.
Okay.
Right now for the plant to bring it up to what we really need.
Basic minimum.
Basic minimum.
Okay.
So that's what we applied for the congressional district spending. If that does not happen, we have a Honeywell as a secondary, and then if not, we will have to phase back improvements and either budget them or get a revolving loan fund from the state to take care of them. But I think we should see, we have an executive session tonight to talk a little bit about the Honeywell lawsuit. So the other one you brought up was the Parks Storage Building. The Park Storage Building is actually part of phase 3 of Bone Park. It includes many more things than just that. It is to build a small kind of a lower profile building over near the camp house that would be able to store the mowers, the in-town equipment that we don't want to trailer every night, because the trailer in and trailer out every night takes time and money, and we could be doing other things. So that has always been in our plan to do. We just haven't had it funded yet. And also because you did direct us to kind of move forward with working with Leaf. If we work that out with them, we have to have somewhere to move our equipment. So right now, that the storage building itself, we do not have a funding source for. We met today with the Department of Local Affairs. They were here for an hour and a half, and we went through several projects and potential funding sources. They do agree that although we want to become more economically sustainable for the long run, that everyone sees that we have to take advantage of these large federal funds over the next 3 or 4 years. So he tried to help us earmark some ideas for that building. That building, is it 500 or 600? What's the other one? 600. Every project we did is coming, over budget. So we added a little bit there. I think 600. The other option we could do is to try to go for a larger Great Outdoors Colorado grant and go for the ball field lights, all of phase 3 Bone Park, which is up in a couple millions of dollars. And then as part of that, try to get this building out of it. But that's what that building is, that number is.
You mentioned that like if we build this building, then you save in another way because you're not doing all these expenses and moving stuff back and forth.
Well, right now they're in this brown building, but if Leaf takes the brown building.
Can you quantify like which one of these like actually saves you money, like will pay for itself or will reduce an expense?
Oh,
Something like
yeah,
that.
Cassie, we could take a look at that, look at the department heads and come up with another symbol or something.
Yeah.
That's a great suggestion. Well, what would be really great is if we could see which line items, like the St. Vrain Trail Eastern Corridor is being funded by CDOT or by another source of funding that it's not just, because when I look at these numbers, I'm like, it feels very like a lot.
Like this is matching funds to something else that we're gonna lose if we
Right.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, just to see where the different funding's coming from, so it doesn't feel like it's just
We
the
have-
town's responsibility.
we have, and we're happy to share it with you. We work on it every week. We have an unmet needs list of every project that we think the town needs, potential funding sources, timeframes for those, matching grants for those. So we have a much more detailed spreadsheet that identifies all projects. But yeah, we can work on those two things. If we can figure out a way to do that to better identify.
You go ahead.
So I have a question about whether inflation was rolled into these numbers, because I recall last budget when we talked about the depot landscaping, it was much lower than 80K. I think it was 50.
It was 55%.
Yeah, and then the small dog park was priced out at 25 and now it's 40. So has inflation been rolled into all of these numbers?
Yes, we've tried to project what our best estimate is for 2023 based on either engineers' estimates or opinions of cost or staff's best estimate based on projects we've done this year.
Okay.
So,
Oh, go ahead, Glenn.
so I just want to confirm, because at the Parks and Rec meeting, they were very concerned about
Building.
building and being moved out and that they would have to come up with that money, but so the town is looking for another source of funding that will not be Parks and Rec having to build that new storage
Of
facility.
course, we'll look for it. We don't know if we'll have it. We may have to go one season with some temporary measures, until we can apply for either the larger GoPro grant or if DOLA, can help us. They said, we are certainly welcome to apply for it. It would not be out of the question, but we have 3 or 4 projects that we probably want to apply to DOLA for, so we will have to prioritize those.
Yeah, so I'm kind of curious about, so we know that fire mitigation is super important, but I'm not really seeing anything that addresses that in this particular list. And frankly, I'm at a loss as to where we would begin anyway, because I know that we're waiting a lot on Boulder County potentially could own to create some kind of task force. And then grant money from that could come down to us. So I don't know. And then I think we had something in here now, but I'm saying that out loud, but in your administrative report. So how do we fit this in?
Great
What-
question. We have money in 2022 that is not on this list. So this was just for unbudgeted needs. We have wildfire mitigation in the 2022 budget of, I believe it's 125,000. We have not spent much of it. And our options are then to roll it forward, the unspent amount, and allocate it in 2023 to additional wildfire mitigation efforts. If the board wishes.
Okay.
Does that help? So we have
A little bit.
125 already that we can roll over while we are working with the county. In my admin report, the county is indicating there's going to be millions of dollars available. We need to update our hazard mitigation plan that we just finished a couple months ago. But it sounds like we would have the opportunity then to have Boulder County be a stronger partner in some of those projects with us. And then Lions Fire, of course, is going to be getting its own pot of money to do some things too.
Okay, so two more things I had. One was, and it kind of comes up later when we talk about blank on the name that we're discussing. Do you want me to turn it on? Okay.
I wish it, yeah. we
So
would
the
also-
audience.
Yeah, yours was.
Okay. Anyway, I'll mention it here. Paid time off. I'm wondering if that's also something, if we added a day of paid time off, PTO. If that's a benefit in addition to if we're going to find that maybe we have to be more conservative on a salary adjustment or something like that.
Sure, there's, as we get into that, we can of course do one-time type of bonuses, so it doesn't add to that bottom line of the salary in hopes that the economy evens back out over the coming years. We can do, as Cassie said, we've been looking at a cost of living adjustment versus just merit-based. But no, certainly we have done that before, where this last year we adjusted retirement and we went out for new health insurance to help keep competitive with some of our immediate neighbors that have more resources than we do. So absolutely, you can look at that. I was going to ask, would it help you to see, would you like us to add wildfire here? But this was unbudgeted. We're going to budget that 125 over there again. And
Well,
if you want to add to it,
I mean, it's, if you've already kind of thinking about having that and potentially rolling over, and this is the addition, then no, I would say we shouldn't add it to this
Okay.
right now. And then something else that started to resonate with me after I sent in my form, when you were talking about the student commission at the last meeting in their discussion about mental health. And that's just been weighing on my mind quite a lot the last 2 weeks. And I don't know what we can do in terms of perhaps with the housing and human services group. Can we think about some kind of a program that helps the teenagers? I don't think they're going to get resources really good from the school. And so I'm just wondering, as a town, is there something we should consider?
I would say that, Leaf has tried to fill that niche for adults and children. I mean, they're happy to help children too, but it's getting them that. Now that we have this co-responder program, we have another 40 hours a week of a mental health professional, and she's happy to do the similar service. It doesn't have to be associated with an incident. So I think we have a couple resources there, they're both going to try to figure out their niche. But that's our intent, is to use that opioid settlement money to do a little bit more. So once that gets finalized, and I think they said our amount per year was going to go, it wasn't very much, 2,600 or something.
Yeah.
Maybe we could offer that to one of those groups to work with to focus on teenage mental health.
I mean, I would love if the students would be interested in really making that a priority, because it'd be curious to find out what would they be interested in, and that we could then really find a way of supporting it. I mean,
or seeing if the, what the school district is doing and do they need some supplemental assistance, but
Tried to comment since you just made that comment. If any of you are up there who haven't, their St. Brain just sent out this email on health. There's some survey that they're doing on health and something else. So I mentioned it. I talked to the student advisory chair here and there. I mentioned it to her. It didn't take off. So for those of you with students already, maybe it's a way to, try to comment to the school district also on that.
And I read that too, and it's strictly for the students to fill out. So I don't know if, Greg, if there's a way, like you were saying, also to get the students in that commission to really include that in their survey, perhaps.
And if you want to make this a separate agenda item at some
Sure.
point, we can.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering if there's a way to maybe work it into the
Yeah.
list.
Okay, so let's,
Thank you for that.
oh, you're
Are you
welcome.
okay? Do you want a pat on the back? You good?
You just gonna take a minute.
Like my mom said, just raise your arms above your head. Okay, so Director Eystone, thank you so much as always for this. And I noticed that the total trustee count on your charts was 6, and there are 7 of us.
Thanks for doing the
sitting
math.
here.
I was looking for it. Nobody do the math.
So, we agree with naming and shaming trustee Edding. Back.
I had a rough week in Pittsburgh, so
No.
that's okay.
all right, in general, do you agree with what
I agree with
Kurt
it,
said?
yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay, great. So why don't we take just a couple minutes before we start the regular meeting? I need the executive session language.
Yeah, we are going to open the regular meeting and then go into executive session so that we will be out by the time the public choose to meeting at 7. But we have to go into open.
Yeah, we have to open the regular meeting, do the roll call and pledge, and then
Oh, we're doing that.
in
all-
5 minutes.
Oh, I see.
So how many minutes would you like?
Just 5.
I think one quick comment on the capital is, I'm sure you all know, but then the utility funds come out of the utility fund direct.
Right.
Because they're not crossing over to be funded some other method.
Well, I have one last question.
Oh, I think that's good. Okay, thanks, everybody. We're gonna take a little break.
Well, I'm just realizing like the total amount is almost.
And just for FYI, Paul Godek is on ready to go whenever you guys are.
I'll send that link now.